Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Living Mythology, I'm proud to bring you Bob Vosseller and his excellent legacy show. Greetings, Bob. How are you?
Doing well. I'm doing a little warm, but other than that, I'm happy to be back, bringing another installment of Spaced Out. And I have a good friend here with me this month, Jad Kaado, who of course is a fellow Starfleet member and CEO, chapter chairman of our Challenger's mothership, the USS Avenger. He's based in Middlesex County. Um, so it's good to see him, but he's here tonight to talk about his book and some of the conventions that he's been to recently in promoting it. Jad, I'm afraid I don't have a whole lot of background on your book, but I'm excited to learn more. So maybe we could just start off by saying, how did you come about to write this, and what were its origins, within the
Sure.
fandom?
So it's actually a story that was accepted into an anthology comic book.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
cool.
which is super fun. Yeah. So it's a, publication by Mark McKenna and
Okay.
Virtual Inks Press. Kind of his press for his work. Mark, of course, is a veteran inker for Marvel and DC Comics for a couple of decades now, I would say, more so. And yeah, he has a lot of titles and such. And myself and a friend of mine, Christian Angeles, another author, we were invited to write stories for this anthology series that he had. It's a second volume. You know, it's a horror anthology that came out a couple of years ago called The Tomb of Baal Bereth. So
Mm,
volume one, and then yeah, volume two came out, and I was lucky enough to get my first creative writing publication actually
that's
because of that, which is
exciting.
quite lovely. And yeah, Christian and I have been going to the local comic book convention circuit here in New Jersey and a little bit in Pennsylvania. And yeah, we did really great with the book in terms of sales. Pretty much sold out of our stock, which was quite lovely.
Wonderful. I know back last fall you were at um, the library, the equivalent of our Fan Nation. I forgot what they call it over there. Fan Con, maybe over at the Vineland Library. That was one
Oh
of your.
yeah, yeah, I think so. FanCon, that was awesome.
Yeah, they have a number of independent writers and artists that bring their wares there, and it makes for a very nice forum. I was very impressed by FanCon. Uh,
Absolutely, it's actually one of the best conventions I've tabled at, hands down. The organizers are very sweet and well organized, right? It was a
yeah,
great atmosphere. As you mentioned, there were a lot of local artists, artisans present, which is really cool. So getting a chance to meet them and chat with them was a lot of fun. And they fed us. They gave us free food, which is like unheard
yeah, I know.
of.
Well, some libraries do that kind of event, and we were very impressed with what they did. It is, it's actually outside of Avenger and Challenger area. It's kind of USS New Jersey turf, but they never seem to be able to provide, people there. So we went there the prior year in 2023, and unfortunately, last year it fell on the same day as the event equivalent in our turf of right in our front yard at the Ocean County Fan Nation, which at one time I was part of. I was part of the operating committee of, so I kind of felt a need to be at our home turf, but many of my members really preferred to go to this one in Vineland. And we're talking about that again because next year, unfortunately, it's going to be October 4th. It's going to be the same day again. So I don't know
Oh
what we're
yeah,
going to
yeah,
do. But
yeah. It's a great
but
convention, regardless. So shout out to Vineland Public Library.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Well,
Awesome memory, yeah.
maybe tell me without giving too much away what the story is about. You said it's a horror story, so it's
Yeah, it's a horror story. So the idea with the Tomb of Baal Bereth is that you have a demon by the name of Baal Bereth. It's actually a biblical demon. And this demon was released from being in captivity for a certain extended period of time, maybe a millennia or two, and he craves souls, and that's kind of like the
Hmm.
overarching story of the first volume, kind of similar to the Crypt Keeper, I would say. Um,
Hmm.
with oh man, I'm blanking on the name. Tales from the Crypt, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's supposed to set up essentially short stories, right? So there's four individual stories in each volume. Each one's about a different monster, which
Hmm.
I find fascinating. Monsters are one of my very favorite subjects when it comes to writing fiction and
Hmm.
also academia. I'm very much interested in researching monsters and such. So when the second volume came around, Mark was really gracious. He invited myself and a friend of mine to write a story each for this anthology series. And I think, during a conversation with Christian and I, the question came up was, who is this Baal Bereth demon really? Like, we know he's a demon, we know he's been in captivity, and we know that, he craves souls, but we really don't know much beyond that. And then
Hmm.
I, did a quick search on my phone, a couple of resources to see where this, Baal Bereth came up. And of course, there's not much on the name either, historically speaking, or at least in terms of, ancient writing and literature. As I said, it's like a biblical demon, right? So it's going to pop in the Hebrew scriptures, Um,
Hmm.
so not much information there. And so we came to that conclusion. It'd be very interesting to write an origin story for this demon, just kind of explaining who this
Yeah,
demon is
that's
and
cool.
yeah, why they would crave souls and such. So Christian ended up writing about a succubus, a social media influencer who turns into a succubus. Fantastic story. Really great, original presentation of a monster that's well known throughout, the history of writing and literature and such. And I was really lucky enough to write the origins for Mark's character, for this
Hmm.
Baalbereth demon, which is amazing. So, um, you know, it was described to me as God of War, like the video game. Uh, Very similar story in that sense. About a leader who, wants to kind of sacrifice in order to save his city and such. So I kind of based it in the Bronze Age of the Levant, around the time, or actually prior to the time that, the scriptures were being written, like the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian scriptures and such.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it's like a very fascinating time period and such. So I figured, it would be cool to make that connection to Beirut, Lebanon. My family is Lebanese. My dad
Hmm.
lived in Beirut for a very long time, and his family, of course. So one reading that I found online said that, it could have been like a precursor name, like an Aramaic or a Canaanite name for Beirut. There's no real kind of
Yeah.
backing to that, but I thought that was a lot of fun to play with. So I, created this town of Beret or whatever, Baal Beret, Bar Beret, Baal Bereth. Sorry for the stuff
Hmm.
there. Baal, of course, in Aramaic and Hebrew means Lord, and Bereth, unknown, as of now. Maybe Beirut, not quite certain. But I thought that would be, fun to play on that, just the name, and make him a king, and he has to defend, his town or his polis,
Hmm.
if you will, from the invasion of the Sea Peoples. Of course,
Oh,
the Sea Peoples are a real entity that invaded the Levant back in the Bronze Age. And then the story kind of goes from there. What does this king have to do in order to save his people? And how is this going to lead to him turning into a demon lord? Uh, and I think that's really about that.
yeah,
And
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And
thank
I
you.
know that horror anthology books or comics, are kind of making a bit of a comeback. I noticed during Free Comic Book Day, picking up a bunch of of the free comics, that a number of them were horror related, anthologies. Go kind of giving tribute to the old EC horror comics of the 50s, um,
Yes,
which was
and
nice
EC
to
is back.
see.
Yeah, and EC is back, right? With their
Yeah, yeah,
title.
that EC itself is back. So that was exciting news. And I know in recent months, I've even started, I was ill back in, like with a bout of, I don't know, COVID or whatever, back in November or so.
Mm.
And uh, my wife Emily picked up, she's like, what do you want? While I'm out and about and you're stuck inside, what do you want? And I said, you know what? You're at the bookstore, Barnes and Noble there. Pick up a copy of Carmela Vampirus, which
Oh
is,
wow.
yeah, which is a comic, which is a magazine, black and white format, but it features comics with an anthology of horror. She's the Vampirella type hostess. Looks very similar. And I just started getting addicted to that well, it's not every month, it's every 2 months. So I even
Yeah.
wrote a letter, and more recently, which I haven't done in decades, write a letter. I think the last time I wrote a letter to a comic book that was published was Deep Space Nine, when Marvel had Paramount Comics at that time,
Oh
and
wow.
Deep Space Nine comic was out. So I don't know what possessed me. It was easy. It was just emailing it out, and they liked what they read. Which was basically my praising them. So, but it was very entertaining, and I think I'm on my fifth issue now. So, it's a good form of entertainment, and it's always intriguing. It's got that kind of Twilight, dark, what's the other rod? So the dark gallery type of
Yeah.
feel to it. And back in the 80s, there was a bunch of, Tales of the Dark Side, Tales of the Unexpected. Then we moved on to Tales of the Crypt, and that into what was that? More of the 90s and on HBO. I don't even remember now, but
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, and now they have these different titles, right? It's no longer Tales of the Crypt. They have Cruel Universe, Cruel Kingdom,
yeah,
and such. So, and they're great stories. They're still producing a lot of very good stuff. So it's worth checking out if you're really into that.
yeah.
Yeah. So you're a horror fan? You like horror? I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I'm into just about everything, with the exception of, I hate to say it because I know some people here watch, but it's just that I haven't had a opportunity to get in it. But I'm really not into so much the anime. But I have had guests on who have, talked to me about things like Gundam and stuff like that. And, and of course I do like Godzilla, and, that sort of thing, which kind of goes in that direction. But I've always been a horror fan. I don't necessarily go for things like the Saw and the overtly gory. I like
Oh, sure.
I like a story around it, and I'm certainly not queasy. You could give me plenty of blood and guts and stuff as long as there's a purpose behind it. So
Yeah,
I
I always think of sorry. I always think that like gore is like a garnish, right? You don't want to have too much of it within a
right.
story. You just want to have the right amount to really.
Sometimes shadows can take the place of a good, or some overt, graphic thing, sometimes, which is why I was very curious when they brought Nosferatu back around,
Oh yeah.
Christmas. I mean, I couldn't wait to see that. I said, like, that's going to be one of my Christmas presents, is I want to go out on Christmas Day to see it. And well, that didn't exactly happen, but I was like a day later or so. But I thought they did an excellent job with that. I always thought that the original 1912 or whatever it was, 21, I thought the original Nosferatu,
Yeah.
for what was supposed to be, what was a knockoff of Dracula, an illegal version. I really thought that was much more terrifying and much scarier, as was the central figure. So
Yeah.
I liked how they expanded that. Well, they had to, because I think the original was like less than an hour, so they had to do something. But 2-hour movie really expanded a lot on
Oh, yeah.
it.
Yeah, the themes of it were astounding. Eggers is so fun. I'm a big fan of his movies, and
Hmm.
uh, just the way he kind of again takes these familiar concepts, right, that fans would know about, and stories, and just be able to present it in such a way that's really unique. It's exciting to see that. You know,
Yeah, Yeah.
And I feel, and I don't know if you would agree with me on this, but I feel like we're in a kind of like a horror renaissance a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
or a resurgence of some such. It hasn't really left, I think, the cultural zeitgeist, but we're really seeing a shift in quality, I think, or kind of like an
I
up
agree.
trend.
I totally agree. Especially with films like what was it last month that I saw Sinners? I finally got around to seeing that, and it was still in the theater, and
Loved it.
that was amazing. That was just so captivating. You know, turning the whole vampire genre on its ear.
Oh, big time, yeah.
Plus
Well,
having a story that was almost independent of that. Um, in much the way of Godzilla -1,
yes.
kind of brought you in and you were like, oh yeah, and Godzilla's here too, from the family's plight, their saga, post World War II and everything. So, I thought it was very clever and added a whole level of realism that we don't always see in horror films.
Exactly, yeah. It really transcends, I think, the genre just in general. Both those movies aren't really about the vampires or
Right.
right, but it is about an underlying fear or anxiety, if you will. That really dominates the space, right? I think that at the end of the day, you got to tell a good story, regardless of what genre you're in, whether it's horror or
hmm
sci-fi or something different. If you don't have a strong enough story. Um, then you have to start relying on a lot of cheap alternatives, right? Like gore. Gore is
Yeah.
really, I think it's just a very cheap way of trying to get a scare out of someone.
Yeah.
It's very visceral. It's meant to shock. And oftentimes you can find a lot of movies that'll just kind of use it, for the aesthetics, right? There's no
Yeah.
real kind of story reason sometimes as to why that shows up. So I really do enjoy that. A lot of writers, of course, a lot of filmmakers are kind of shifting away, from that trend. I think writers have always been very diverse in what they've been putting out. And of course, same thing with filmmakers, but, we're seeing less of those saws perhaps and more of kind of these cerebral films
Yeah.
and also just different types of horror, which is really cool. I'm glad that's starting to become, a discussion point for a lot of folks. It's not just necessarily one specific definition.
hmm
Um, you can have so many different varieties of it. A lot of folks, when they ask me, what do I write? I say horror. They always assume it's some sort of gore fest, right? Uh,
Yeah.
that's going to be very transgressive or whatnot. And it's not always the case, obviously there's good stories within all these different subgenres, if you will. But it's cool to see, someone like Sam Eggers who's able to take something like Nosferatu, and then I believe he also did The Northman, right?
Yeah.
Very
Mhm.
different type of movie, but still very scary. Maybe not a traditional horror movie, um, but definitely has a lot of elements to that. And also The Witch, right? Retelling like
Yeah.
a fairy tale, the way that he's able to present, almost like that horror like um, atmosphere, within these three different types of films is, I think, fantastic. And I think that's what we're all craving, right? At least I
Yeah.
was a spec fic fan,
I also saw, well, I guess it was around the time of the holidays, and I didn't know, or no, I think it was last October, because I didn't expect it to have a Christmas theme. And it just was a fluke that, you know, Fridays I have off and wasn't doing anything, and just thought, oh, all right, this afternoon I'm going to see, go catch a matinee. And I caught, and the only thing that really was that I hadn't seen or wanted to see was a movie called, was it, now I don't remember, Twister, like with the clown. It involved a clown. Am I remembering this right?
Oh,
Uh,
Terrifier?
Terrifier. I'm sorry.
Terrifier,
And
yeah.
and this was the third one. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I didn't remember ever seeing, advertisements in the past. I mean, somehow I missed that franchise. But it didn't matter because you could really catch up really fast to figure
Yeah.
out what's happening, and it sort of was set during the Christmas, so even if you didn't catch the two before, and now I've got to go find them, probably at the library or something. Um, I did find them a little that one a little heavier on the gore.
Yeah.
It also involved a mystery. I wasn't super satisfied with that, but it did catch my interest. I always like a good crazy clown.
Indeed. There's a killer clown in the Ballbarth series.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. It's
They have
cool.
a demonic clown in there too. Very small clown, but a demonic
Well,
one.
and I knew I couldn't be dragging. Well, I can't drag Emily to any kind of horror film
Oh
or
yeah.
especially not one that has a clown in it, because
Oh sure.
he's not a big fan. I remember when I used to have to cover the clown fest, or kind of a clown convention
No way.
based in Seaside Heights during the 80s, 90s, where they would, basically it was a clown kind of convention where they would learn things like makeup and uh, acts and balloon making and all the things that you would go to learn about for clowns.
It's
So,
amazing. Is that still around?
unfortunately, they moved it to Atlantic City, then they moved it out of state. I
Mm.
don't know where it is now, but I kind of enjoyed doing that, and every year I had to find a different angle
Yeah.
of. Plus, they presented a circus as well, which was heavy on the clown antics, but that was always part of the weekend, and it was open to the public. The workshops weren't so much. I mean, I got to go check them out because of to covering it, but that was always fun, and I even got to talk to some of them about, okay, some clowns can be creepy, like are any of you here like into, that kind of thing? And they were like, well, yeah, it can be, but and when we do know that we can, as much as we make little kids happy, we could also scare people wearing the same outfit,
Oh
so.
yeah. Yeah. There was that whole incident in the news a couple years ago where people were wearing kind of these scary clown masks, if you will. They're like Halloween masks, supposed to be killer clowns, I guess. In the vein of it. Um, and yeah, they would show up to people's Ring doorbells. Do you remember that?
Yeah, actually, I do. I remember that was a thing at that,
Yeah,
for a while.
it got serious for a little bit. See, people crave that scare, right? In some way, shape, or form. I'm also just thinking about clowns gambling at a casino in Atlantic City. Just pulling out like a $1 bill and just it just keeps on going and going and going and going. It's like this very old bill or whatnot. You know, would they make the coins disappear?
Yeah, yeah.
Tokens or
Oh
whatever.
my
Yeah,
God. I
yeah.
remember one of the Monster Mania conventions in Cherry Hill where
Oh yeah,
they always take like a special theme, like they try to reunite the cast of some classic horror movie. And one year it was Killer Clowns, from outer space, and of course they would screen it and have some of the cast people come and talk about it and stuff like
yeah,
that. Which, some movies that are just kind of bad, but they're so bad that they're a cult classic, so that
yeah.
they have somebody going in and talk about them. So
The Terrifier cast has actually been making its rounds, or their rounds around the New Jersey circuit.
he
So
is a pretty, you know, creepy looking killer clown. I mean, like he could give Pennywise a run for his,
oh
money.
yeah,
So,
absolutely, absolutely.
and I'm sure that I think that was the third one. I'm sure a fourth is in the works.
It's actually there are four films total. It's All Hallows Eve, I think, is the first one,
Oh,
and the
okay.
clown makes an appearance. And then there's Terrifier 1 to 3.
Okay.
But I think I've only seen Terrifier 1, the first one, or not the first one, but the second installment of the series. It wasn't bad. I'm not too big into slashers. Slashers and gore tends to be my
Yeah.
kind of least favorite of the horror, trope, or not trope, but genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it probably falls, definitely falls more into the slasher, although it wasn't necessarily just slasher. It was very creative ways to murder people. Was the film Thanksgiving? I think that came out in 2023,
Oh yeah.
and I thought, that was kind of clever in the way. It was more of a mystery, even though I could figure out exactly, I sat there like within the first 5 minutes, and I was with other people, other members of Challenger that were, the few of us that enjoy horror that I could
Yeah.
convince to go join it. You join me, and I'm like, okay, I think I know. I think I know. And but I wouldn't say anything. And they're like, how did you figure that out? I was like, well, he slips a sentence right there. And and I'm sure you do the same thing because you're a writer. You're thinking like a writer, like there's never a throwaway line without a purpose.
Exactly.
Usually something that will lead back later on. And that was my guess, and it paid off that time. But
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was pretty creepy, like a little Thanksgiving mask. You never thought a little cardboard, mask would, you know, turn out to be as horrific as it was, and it led for a good murder mystery.
Oh yeah. Evil objects, right? That's always a fun one to
Yeah,
raise around, like a haunted object or something. And I think that's a lot of fun with horror is that you can really find it anywhere, right?
yeah.
Uh, you can have a haunted keyboard or a computer, right? Haunted cardboard mask, you know, uh, different types of places. It's really phenomenal, the kind of, I guess, limitless approach that one can take, to write stories within that framework. Yeah.
What was the movie I saw recently that had to do with it had to do with a pool of all things. Yeah, I think um and it was out in the theater a very short time, and I finally got to see it on streaming. And unfortunately, I can't think of the name of it, but it had a little mystery to it. It was pretty creepy, and it was about literally the water within the pool and everything. And
Mhm.
I think that will probably spawn a sequel. There was room for that there, but at the same time, it had a self-contained story and a mystery and a mythos to always go to your local library and research your house when you buy it to find out if somebody got slaughtered there.
Oh yeah.
It's always seemed to be like, that, and don't go to the cemetery when you're fleeing from a murderer. Um, but
Yeah. One place you don't want to go. Want to avoid going there.
and one movie that's coming up, which is kind of more the sci-fi horror kind of genre, but at the same time does have a degree of horror to it, is the next, Megan 2.0,
Oh
which
yeah.
which
That
was a fun
was
experience to watch because I went with two friends of mine, two female friends of mine, and we were of a certain age, and there was a bunch of young people that came in here, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was funny because they found humor in like different things, and we were laughing at certain things because there was a degree of tongue in cheek. It's not campy, but at the same time, they're going through basically, and we're experiencing that with AI issues
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
um, and robotics and that, and how far will it program, and will it protect someone to the extent of killing them off. And I found it to be a very entertaining, and enjoyable movie. um Plus I thought it was marketed incredibly. Last time around they had an AI, um kind of a message that would come to you every day and
Mm.
ask you questions, and would ask you to do a video for them, and it
Good.
it did start to get creepy. It started,
That's pretty. That's
you were
pretty creepy right
communicating
there.
back and forth with this thing, and it was saying things like, you're my best friend and I want to be,
Oh man.
I got a kick out of it. I really did. But after a while, I was like, yeah, I'm not doing a video for you. It's like we can dance together. And, it's like, and this is,
Imagine dodging all those like spam texts, right, about loan consolidations and
yeah, yeah,
whatever. All of a
exactly. I was
sudden,
like,
I'm like,
I'll
hey,
take that
how did
over.
we see you at the party last night? Who's this again? This is Jenny, aren't you, Rob?
Yeah, I'll
It's
take it
like,
over the
hello there,
spam,
friend.
but at the same time, I was like, where is this information going?
They're just gonna can you imagine sending them the videos, right? Then it's gonna be like, hey there, Bob. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I like the blue curtains in your house,
Well,
Bob.
that's what I thought. I thought, as and obviously I've been known to do pretty silly, daring things. But I thought I got to draw the line. If I'm going to go viral, I want it to be on my own terms. I don't want it to be like, you can laugh at me if you want, but I don't necessarily want to do it in promotion of a product.
It's too funny.
That isn't my own.
Yeah, yeah. That's like another fun aspect of horror I enjoy is, the presentation of the story. The Blair Witch Project was so genius when it came out.
Yes. Yeah.
And the marketing they did around that, where they actually hid all those actors from the public eye, right?
Yeah.
For like a couple months or a few months or something, and actually put out all those like missing persons posters, and was able to really get like folks kind of interested, right? Or hyped up really for this flick.
It
Of
was
course,
amazing because this was
yeah.
kind of pre full blown social media blitz kind of stuff, like,
Oh
that
yes,
we later see. But,
yeah. Had to take a lot of orchestrating. Very, very impressive. Although now with AI, it's very strange, right? Because you can almost instantaneously, create these videos and these images, right? And I can't help but think of when Orson Welles, or not, or yeah, was it Orson Welles who did
yeah.
the radio play
Yes, War of the Worlds. Yeah.
War of the Worlds? Yeah, exactly. And just very brilliant, just kind of going on a radio station and talking about it or whatever. Obviously scripted, but the way people reacted to that, just tuning in.
Yeah, because they tuned in late. They didn't,
Yeah.
or they didn't necessarily pay attention to the little disclaimers, which I think there was more than one, that said you're watching or you're listening to um, an adaptation of H.G. Wells, produced by Orson Welles and all of
Mm.
this. And they would just, back then, and who doesn't even do that today? I mean, even with our streaming service world, sometimes, regular TV will start the news in the middle of something and or switch channels and go to something else and say, what is going on here, And
Yeah.
that's what people did. They were like, because the family sat around the radio and looked at the radio.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
If we remember our episodes of the Waltons, that's what they did. And it was a family center point. But if you have a bunch of kids that are talking and mom's serving dinner and all this, paid attention to the disclaimer, and all of a sudden you realize what Martians have invented. They did this little place called Grover Mills. Where's Grover Mill?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I think that AI will certainly have an effect like that, right? Someone will make a video about the head of state somewhere and almost
Oh
bring someone
yeah.
to war.
We've already seen some pretty amazing and scary stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen like on Reels or maybe TikTok or both. Though whoever is manufacturing these black and white, very creepy horror-ish, like nostalgia kind of stuff of these monsters
Mm.
and um I'm always fascinated by those. And then there's the other one that has these movie trailers that are made to show like the Avengers or Star Wars or Alien, that what would they have been like if they came out in the 1950s? Have you seen?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm fascinated by those because it's like, wow, that would have been really cool. Like that would be like they should do a retro take on that. I mean, in reality, Alien was done retro because it was the movie The Terror from Outer Space was Alien before there was Alien, you know.
Yeah.
But done in a pretty cheap manner, you know, that when we look back now. But I
Yeah.
still remembered watching that movie on, I don't know, Chiller Theater or Creature Features when I was a kid. And always happy when they would rerun that again, you know, like
Yeah.
always like, you know, oh, the alien has made it upstairs, you know, because the rocket was, you know, like 2 levels. They couldn't really, like, it wasn't that huge of a ship.
Yeah.
So how far could it have actually gone and all that? So, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, those movies are endearing, right? A lot of, manual labor, I guess. Yeah, a lot of labor went into it, right? No matter how good or bad these films are, uh,
Yeah.
and for
Well,
me
the one
personally, it's
it,
a
you
bit
know,
overstated.
the alien who they had done a pretty good job with, but I think for whatever reason, the original actor, um, you know, who's paid such and such to get into this rubber, you know, costume,
Mhm.
uh, or maybe they sculpted it for somebody else, and I think he had alcohol problems or something, so they had to give it to somebody else who was taller or bigger, and it didn't fit there,
Yeah,
and so they just had the jaw like hanging. Like you could still see it, you know, in the stills and all that, and or even
it's
in the
hilarious.
filming, because the producers was like, well, we cannot afford to change the actor, nor can we afford to replace the mask. So this has to work, you know.
Sounds like a good Mystery Science Theater
Yeah,
type of movie, right?
just
And
like when Bela Lugosi's untimely death, you know,
oh,
during Plan 9 from Outer Space.
no.
Like, okay, in the other scene he's this high, and this scene we'll just have him have the cape over, you know, up to his face, so he doesn't,
Unbelievable.
and he'll be several inches taller.
It reminds me of Manos, The Hands of Fate. Have you ever seen that one?
Probably have, yeah.
Oh man, that's a good Mystery Science Theater I want to check out. Again, like a horror movie type of vibe, but the production was so campy and yeah, it was just like horrendous. It was like a very disorganized production. They had forgotten to put in the opening credits to the movie, so there's
Oh,
just a solid 5 minutes of B-roll that adds nothing to the story. Uh, it's a gem to watch. If anyone who's listening or watching enjoys really terrible horror films, Manos: The Hands of Fate. Can't recommend it. I do recommend it. I can't recommend it enough.
well, I
Oh,
know, you know, you're much younger than me, but I so remember the classics of, you know, those Friday or Saturday afternoon, you know,
mm,
creature features, Chiller Theater, and I'm sure I'm forgetting one. Um, you know, that would run these old black and white films that, you know, uh, are now classics. And now, of course, we have, you know, Svengoolie on MeTV on Saturdays.
oh, okay. What
It's
is it called? Stranguli?
Svengoolie.
Svengoolie.
Yeah, he's a horror host from Chicago, but
Oh,
has been around for so long. He's actually the second Svengoolie. He was some other person played him a little differently, and he ended up being like the son of Svengoolie. And then after so many years, they just dropped the junior.
yeah,
And you know, he's very well known. It's very, you know, he's campy, and he has some sidekicks like Nostalgia Ferratu, you know, and
yeah,
Gwen Gooley, and this imp with, you know, with uh with wings. Um, and it's on VTV, which has an affiliate in Middletown, New Jersey. But he's never been here. It's broadcast out of Chicago still.
okay.
And it's been around for, I think they just celebrated their 45th anniversary or something.
Wow.
And I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
he was off for a few years back in the 90s or something, but they brought him back, and he just expanded to you know, other affiliates around the country. And I'd love it if he made it to Chiller Theater around here, or the convention, or
Write him a letter. You never know.
Montpellier.
Yeah, yeah. There's been a lot of great like horror appearances, like celebrities. Kane Hodder, I know, has been showing up a lot in a lot
Yeah.
of conventions, which is really cool. I was at the Real Monster Festival at King of Prussia, like that
Oh, must have been fun.
that was fantastic, and I think they had a couple of the different Jasons,
Hmm.
including Kane, which is really neat. Also, George Takei was there.
Oh, really?
It was really fun. Yeah, I was debating whether or
Oh
not.
my.
Oh my. Yeah, I wanted to meet him, but I was like alone at the table, and there was a really cool setup with that convention where if you want to meet a celebrity, you can cut the line, which is really cool. And then, there's obviously like a handler or something who like watches over your table. But I couldn't like organize it enough. Like I got busy at the times when the guy was free, and then when he wasn't free, I wasn't busy. I couldn't like quite leave. But I did see George Takei walk by, and I gave him like the full-on Vulcan,
uh,
yeah, and he gave it back to me, which was really cool. So I took that as a win.
well, George has always been very, very welcoming to fans. He's been very
Yeah.
nice to fans. And I remember going way back to even the early Avenger days,
Oh yeah.
when we would go to a creation con that we kind of jokingly referred to as the Turkey Con, because it would always be Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah.
And we'd go into the Penta Hotel, which affectionately we renamed, Aurora Pente
Mm.
Hotel. But we were there one time with the table, because at that time the Avenger was all of Starfleet Region 7.
Mhm.
And we brought in breakfast, for some of the celebrities. And actually Brenda did that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I won't get into too much of that. That was very nice of her. But I do
Yeah.
remember that George used to enjoy jogging. This takes back a number of years. He would jog, that in the morning, and on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, he would jog around the city and then come back in, and then, presumably shower off and stuff before he would make his con appearances. But he did stop by to us. And we do have a picture of Brenda sitting on his lap. So
That's really funny. I think I may have seen that. Because
yeah.
yeah, it was like Alex was in one of the pictures. I don't know if he sat on George's lap, but I do remember
No, I
seeing
don't think Alex did, but
that.
Brenda did, and George just like smiled and was like,
That's too funny.
but it was he was very welcoming, and I remember him at another convention years later, in the Atlantic City area
Yeah.
that Challenger went to, and uh, it was the first time they did a convention like this. They were known for doing jewelry shows and stuff like that. Like
Oh
they
wow.
didn't know what they were getting into with Star Trek. And the crowd, they almost had to shut it down. The fire marshal was not pleased with the amount of people, the large number of
Mhm.
people. And George, I think, had to cut it. Not that he cut it short. He extended his autograph time, but finally he said, I gotta go. I literally gotta go. Like I have to get out of this table and leave. Sorry guys. I've been here for like an extra hour or so, or whatever.
It's intense. It can get very intense.
Yeah.
I had to
Yeah.
wait a long time to meet Melissa Navias. And
Ah,
Novice. I'm terrible when it comes to name pronunciation and recall. And of course, the gentleman who plays Pike, I forgot his name too. But it was like, yeah, it was like an over an hour wait to like get the photograph, which was worth it. It was fantastic. And of course, it was like 2 seconds. Like you just shook one of their hands and just took the photo, and But it
more
was
recently, you were at Philly Fan Expo, which I know
yes.
from being there for a few years ago, which
Mm,
incidentally had Shatner there then too. Um, that's enormous. That
yeah.
is, they pack them in. you know.
Oh, they did. Yeah, and now it's on a different level, right? It's no longer in the original showroom. They moved across the street, I think, and it wasn't the
Oh,
same building,
really?
but
Okay.
yeah, it's much bigger space. It's been like that for a while, I think. But yeah, Bill was there, which is really cool. I did not get a chance to meet him. It was actually a pretty busy convention. Um, Mel Gibson was there and Danny Glover.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh,
That
yeah,
must have been something.
yeah, that was like pretty neat. I didn't expect to hear both of them being there, so that was pretty cool. Of course, doing the Lethal Weapon kind of reunion.
Hmm.
Christopher Lloyd was there.
Hmm.
It's pretty neat. Yeah, so it's the conventions are still so much fun, and I love the Philly Fan Expo because it really reminds me of what New York Comic Con used to be
Yeah.
over 10 years ago or so. Where everyone's just together in the same space. It's not really dominated by these kind of large corporate installations. You walk into the Javits Center, you're gonna see that like Marvel and DC will have these like massive areas, right? And they put up maybe like five or six, glass displays with these
Yeah.
very overpriced figures or whatever in them. Um, but yeah, Philly is just kind of like the good old days, right? Where you can just kind of walk up to someone. I had
Yeah.
the honor of meeting Heather Antos, the editor in chief of all the Star Trek comics now.
Okay.
That was really cool. She's phenomenal, like really fantastic. And ended up getting a couple of her stuff. Um, and then yeah, there wasn't that many Trek people at that one in particular. But yeah, New York. I wish New York Comic Con, you know, uh, kind of reverts back to what they used to be. Um, I was lucky enough to meet Deanna Troy, Marina Sirtis, of course,
Yeah. Yeah.
at New York Comic Con back in 2006 or seven, and she was fantastic. Oh, she was so great. I had lined up to meet her. There was no one there. I figured I'd just kind of, get a little bit there, like early, like a half hour early or so. And she just like peeks in from behind and sees me, and then just like waves me over. And I end up having this like a half-hour conversation with her.
Yeah. She's very personable. I think the first time I saw her might have been one of her first, if not maybe the first. And was that in New York? Is that in New York or that goes back a ways? And she was very, unlike the Marina Sirtis that we would later see, who would basically take over a room. She was very quiet. And
Mm.
I and another person, we big fans. We were both in uniform, but we, shamelessly used our press cards to, to get behind the scenes and talk to her. And she seemed almost like, oh my gosh, look at all those people, And then the next convention, which seemed like only a year later, she was like, hey, get back in here. I'm going to start talking, like she would do. And then a very small show in Cherry Hill. Again, another group that really didn't know, what they were getting into when they did a big sci-fi convention. Um, the con didn't do as well, but we had a blast. The
Mm.
monkeys were there.
Oh wow.
Davy Jones, was still alive, and
Mm.
he was a blast. And they did a unscheduled little concert thing for his appearance,
Oh
which was
wow.
very nice of him.
That's
But
really cool. Yeah.
Marina, when like we had a table there, a promotional table, for
Mm.
the club, and we had just gotten back from lunch, so we were kind of like scrambling, like, oh, and like quick, put your uniform on. Not that we needed the uniform on to go see Jonathan Frakes and Marino, who were together, in the room doing a joint panel.
Yeah.
And so, my exo Jeff and I go in, and he forgot his comm badge or something, and I didn't have a pip, or I don't know what it is, but she looked over and like, wait a minute, like she was like making fun of us. She took a cell phone away. Now this is before, the era of, selfies became, or
Yeah. Like
phone.
the flip phone.
Yeah, and she would, but they were taking pictures. Like, wait a minute, like you can't be shooting that. She actually took the person's phone away for a while. Did return it, and of course she posed for pictures, like, later. So it was all cool, and they were both busting on, like let's do our favorite Patrick Stewart imitation, and and Michael Dorn, loved Michael Dorn, but she was kind of busting on him, and they were busting on Brent Spiner, and all in a good-natured way. But
Yeah.
it was a really, some of those cons, that that are run less stringently, are so much fun, because it was like they didn't know what. And then there's cons where the people that are there just to sell you their autograph after all these years, like
Yeah.
Barbara Eden, who I had met years earlier over at McGuire Air Force Base when she did a USO show. So I went there and talked to her about that, and that was nice that she remembered it and everything. So,
Yeah.
we're actually coming up, because here's Hercules.
Yeah, there's Hercules.
Ah, what's
We
the
have
time?
big
I
God.
didn't bring my phone down, so I wasn't paying attention to the time.
We have around 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well,
Okay.
we will have to conclude with our regular contact information. You might have more, Jad, on your more professional level. If you have your website where this can be ordered, or or
Oh, sure. I don't think it's online yet. Excuse me. And the physical copies have sold out. But y'all can follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Jad Kaado, JadKaado. That's where I'll be posting, future convention appearances and stuff. I'm going to be at the New Jersey Horror Con actually in September, this upcoming September.
it's in
Fantastic.
Edison, right? Is that the one in Edison? Or
Yes, it's amazing. It's one of my favorite conventions to be at. Organizers are brilliant. They're really great people. So I'll be there with Christian. We're going to be tabling there. Very excited for that, and hopefully I'll have some new stuff out.
cool.
And crossing my fingers for a good year.
Yeah. Well, it was great having you. I, of course, can be reached at, beamaboard@aol.com, or, check out USS Challenger's Facebook page and usschallenger.org. Jad is, of course, the chapter chairman, captain numero uno, big kahuna of the USS Avenger, that is 40 years strong and will be celebrating its big birthday on June 21st.
Yes, we're very excited for that. We're going to have a virtual event for it. So if you're an SFI, please, look out for our posts. Hop in, have fun with us. It's going to be really great. 40 years. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
that is a milestone.
It's older than me.
Yep.
Happy 40th to the Avenger, and I wish you phenomenal success in this and all your other endeavors. I
Thank you.
must say I enjoyed this conversation a great deal and learned a lot from it. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. This was
Thanks
fantastic.
for having us, sir.
and thank you, and to all joyous journeys and amazing adventures. Until next time, this is Hercules Invictus signing out. Bye.
Take care.